Another game where we thought Ohio State might see a real challenge, and another game where that never materialized after, I guess, like the first two drives of the game. Nathan Baird from cleveland.com, along with Stephen Means and Doug Lesmerises from Ohio State's 54-7 victory here in Bloomington over the Hoosiers. Another laugher. I think it's something like, I lost track. I have it in my story. It's like 238-44 or something like that over the last 4 games. It's getting kind of crazy, and we keep expecting some challenge to step up and slow Ohio State down, somebody to push them into the second half, and it's been a long time since we've seen that. So is Ohio State a lock to win the Big Ten Championship from what you see right now, Doug?
What Ohio State's doing the last month is not that unusual for Ohio State. We talk about boring good Ohio State. That's what we're in. I think the interesting part is so many other teams around the country are struggling with teams they should beat. Oklahoma struggled today. Oregon struggled. We saw Michigan struggle in the second half against Rutgers a couple weeks ago, right? Penn State loses to Illinois. You see everybody else in a weird year. Clemson has 3 losses, right? You see all these teams. Alabama had a hard time with Tennessee a little bit. So you watch everybody else have a hard time, and then you turn to Ohio State, and it's like, oh, Ohio State is stomping people. Ohio State is on a upswing. And it feels hard, like, not to say that. Iowa was supposed to have a good defense. They lost at home to Purdue in a game that wasn't close 2 weeks ago. Then Purdue came out today and lost to Wisconsin. So it's like, who's good? Ohio State's good. So kind of yes, I guess is my answer to the question, because this is like typical Ohio State now. Since their loss, this is the Ohio State you usually see at this point of the season. Meanwhile, in the Big Ten and around the country, a lot of people are sputtering. Michigan might be the one exception, but they still feel a little one-dimensional to me. But Michigan, like, don't sleep on Michigan, but it feels like the Buckeyes are right where they need to be.
So here's the one quibble I have with where we are at with Ohio State right now, is because I think UCLA, who Oregon beat today on the road, and Tennessee, who Alabama beat at home, are probably still better than anybody Ohio State has played this year, except for Oregon, who they lost to at home. And that's still kind of the crux of the question right now. Like, I want to know what would happen if Ohio State played on the road against a team the equivalent of UCLA, which they have not seen. They might this coming week when they play Penn State at home, but that's still the thing that hangs out there for me. So I'm not going to call them a lock yet, because I don't know if they might still be vulnerable when they actually play a team that doesn't have to use its 4th-string walk-on quarterback in the first half. It means something to me. That's why I wrote after the game. It means something to me that now Ohio State is flattening opponents in a way that it didn't earlier this year. When it was on the field with Tulsa, and Tulsa's playing them deep in the 4th quarter, so it does mean something that Ohio State's doing that right now. But we're still talking about a level of team that we're criticizing in some ways, I think rightly, the way some of these other national powers, the other contenders, are not putting away teams. But the teams that they're not putting away are much better than the teams Ohio State is putting away right now, is the way I see it. Stephen, how do you kind of look at this? Have you seen enough over the last month that you think Ohio State's a lock to win the Big Ten?
Yeah. Who's supposed to stop that offense? That offense is averaging almost 50 points a game and 550 total yards of offense, and their quarterback's getting confident to the point that when we talked about it, I mean, that throw to Jackson Smith-Njigba he had today, he's had a couple of those throws. That today's was probably the most impressive, but who's supposed to slow that down? Even if, like, everything that defense did today was kind of fake, because Indiana's offense sucks. But what doesn't suck is this Ohio State offense, and who is supposed to keep that offense under 35, 40 points at this point, given what we've seen from Penn State against Illinois, given what we've seen with Michigan being one-dimensional at this point, given what we've seen from Iowa basically not having an offense. So they're just Indiana with a much better defense at that point. Who's supposed to stop that on their schedule at this point? And if this defense just needs to be enough to not get in the way of the offense, they've already accomplished that.
A fair rebuttal. Doug, I think you had more to say.
So Oklahoma played Kansas today. Kansas has the 121st ranked defense in the country. Indiana was the 20th. Oklahoma had 14 points after 3 quarters. Ohio State had 51. And Indiana last week played Michigan State, who's undefeated and in the top 10. They held Michigan State to 14 offensive points and 3.9 yards per play. Ohio State scored 52 offensive points and had 7.8 yards per play. I don't disagree with the idea that they haven't beaten a team as good as UCLA. I think they'd crushed UCLA when they played them, though. So, I think we have enough, transitive. They're stomping people. I'm not holding back anymore because I just don't see – if Iowa couldn't do what it had to do against Purdue. Iowa couldn't stop David Bell. Penn State couldn't find a way to win against Illinois. Like it's just stuff like that that's happening. Again, Michigan might be the caveat. Don't sleep on Michigan, but just most of the other stuff is like, to what Steven said, I just don't see anybody stopping this offense.
I don't necessarily see anybody stopping this offense either, but I think there are some decent defenses still out there, and if they have anything close to a competent offense, that's where the game changes a little bit. They can keep the ball away from Ohio State. So again, I'm not predicting a loss, but I'm also saying that I'm not like betting my house on Ohio State winning the Big Ten championship, because I still want to see them get back on the field with somebody that is a competent team. And right now, the last 4 teams that they've played are not competent FBS teams, frankly. I mean, Indiana's the closest thing, but not when they're putting the quarterbacks that they had on the field tonight in a monsoon, expecting them to try to beat Ohio State. It's just not going to happen. So we'll keep debating this. Listen to the pod anywhere you can find a podcast, and get the text 614-350-3315.